It's an interesting thing, isn't it? How some things seem to age with all the dignity of a bad curry, whilst others just don't. Wines, cheeses, or the original Audi R8. I mean, looks are a subjective thing, but would you just look at it? To my eye, it looks better than it ever has. It's aged so gracefully, and to my mind as well, it kind of makes some of the more contemporary metal look a little bit too try-hard with their big scoops and wings and aggressive splitters. It's a beautiful thing. Now, I know it's becoming a tired motoring journalism thing to say in general, but I need to mention it, and it is the manual gated gearbox in this car. It is just a joy to use. It's an authentic, evocative click-clack accompanied by rifle bolt precision. It really is a very lovely thing. One thing that might take you by surprise there is it's a slightly longer throw than you might expect, but it actually suits the ethos and the characteristics of the car really, really well. We'll circle back to what I mean by that a little later. This particular car is equipped with a mag ride suspension, which wherever mentioned is always followed up by how unreliable it is. And that might be true, but let me tell you, the merits of this system are not discussed enough, because when it's working correctly, it is fantastic. Now, with it in comfort, you can feel the car is really, really supple. Bumps and creases in the road don't seem to unsettle it much at all. It's got good wheel travel, and you can also feel that the car isn't afraid to make use of the full throw of the damper. So yes, I like that very much. Now, as for the engine, well, it was a masterpiece in the Audi RS4, and to be honest with you, it's even more at home in this car. Probably just the R8's slimmer 1560 kilo waistline, but every one of those 414 horses just feels that little bit more poignant in this car than it does in the RS4. One of the most amazing things that Audi's managed with this engine is that it maintains such a visceral personality, but at the same time it is so refined. Now, often these R8s can be criticised for being a little bit too quiet. They do sound pretty insane with an exhaust on. However, for me, it's just about right. I can hear the engine, I can hear intake, I can hear a little bit of exhaust noise. It's a nice symphony rather than just having a rather ruckus exhaust note. Now, there is one caveat to the engine, and that is that you need to rev the car to really get a bit of momentum going. In lower RPMs, it's a little bit like a quick diesel. It's not really until the upper echelons of the dial that it really starts to have a bit of poke about it. We're on to that tricky subject of if the V8 R8 should be considered a supercar or not. Well, I'm afraid I'm sticking to my guns on this one, and I say it is a supercar. For one, just look at it. Number two, all the underpinnings, many of the components, and pretty much the entire chassis is shared with the Lamborghini Gallardo, an unequivocal supercar of the same era. Finally, the performance, well, you can't really pick that much fault with it, because the Ferrari 360, which was pretty much the benchmark of the early 2000s, had only been out of production for 2 years by this car's release, and this car matched it in terms of performance. Now, this next thing I'm going to say might be a little bit of an unpopular opinion, but quite honestly, with a mid 4 second 0 to 60 time, and a top speed knocking on the door of 190 miles an hour, in a road car, do we really need much more? I'm not sure we do. Now, with all this talk about performance, I want to make one thing really, really clear, and this is probably the most important piece of knowledge I can impart on you if you're thinking about buying one of these cars. If you're the type of person that's really, really interested in the performance figures and getting fractions of a second off your 0 to 60 time, this is probably not the car for you. My advice there would be go look at something like an R35 GTR, to be quite honest. No, the joy of the R8 comes more from revving out that glorious V8 engine, leaning on that tremendous Lamborghini shared chassis, and tuning your heel and toe just right to make those changes through that beautiful open gate box even smoother. I can liken it a little bit to playing a fine musical instrument, wherein if you're a bit too ham-fisted, you're not going to make very good music. Did you notice that heel and toe? Conversely, something like an R35 GTR really only starts to make sense for me when you're pushing really, really hard. It's not the R8's bag, and I'm okay with that. Now, if we couple the fact that this car is slightly happier at a more relaxed pace, alongside the sheer refinement of the thing and distinct lack of any wind or tyre noise, it's got a serious set of GT credentials going for itself. Now, have I maybe missed the point? And the fact is that it's not a bad supercar, but that it's an even better GT car. How's that for a consensus on the is the V8 a supercar or not? I think I just united the internet. Fortifying those GT credentials even further is the quattro system that you find in the Audi R8. It's the same underpinning, same front differential that you'll find in an LP era Lamborghini Gallardo, and it can send up to 30% of the power to the front if the car deems it necessary. And that gives this thing real all-weather usability. I mean, even if it's soaking wet, to be breaking traction with any regularity, you would need to be doing something pretty silly. This car runs Uni-Royal Rain Sport tyres, and yeah, unless you're really throwing it about and trying to convince the car to slide, it's not going to break traction. Now, if I had to name one area that's left me longing for a little bit more in the R8, it's the steering feel. Now, it's not to say it's bad, certainly compared to all the modern electronically assisted stuff that you'll find in supercars of today. It's leagues beyond it being hydraulic. However, there is just this inherent vagueness to the steering, probably not helped by the fact that we've got a differential and drive shafts and added heaviness up front, but that is a reasonable compromise in the UK. Now, one thing that might take you by surprise is just how nice an interior this still is to sit in, even 11, 12 years on since this thing was new. This particular car's got lashings of carbon fibre and leather everywhere, so that no doubt helps. But to be honest, even a base spec R8 is still going to feel pretty good for its age. It's wearing those years well. Really, it's only when you start taking note of things like the sat-nav and the infotainment system that it starts to feel dated. It's a wonder that we actually ever used this sat-nav to get anywhere. Now, I had planned to summarise today's video with how nice it's been to drive a big old school manual V8 and everything was going to be really rosy and very positive. But I just can't bring myself to do it. And the reason for that is because the whole thing has felt kind of bittersweet. See, let me explain. Constant war on climate change, ever-tightening emissions laws, turbocharging, electric cars, hybrids becoming the normality. Cars like this, well, they've kind of had their day, and I don't think they're coming back. The R8 is an amazing tribute to an era of car that existed for only a glancing moment in the automotive timeline. Cars like this, because I grew up with them, they'll always have a place in my heart, but not necessarily my driveway over the next 10, 20, 30 years, who knows. So if you're sat there thinking, should I do it? Should I pull the trigger and buy an R8? Yes, you should, but do it before it's too late. And before you do it, check out my used buyer's guide in the top right hand corner now to make sure you get a good car. Now, if you've enjoyed this video and you want to see more, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Thanks, guys.